I'm Anthony F. Elmo, writer, producer, director, and narrator of the film 200 Years of Black Memphis History. I'm introducing segments from our film 200 Years of Black Memphis History into short history lessons called Profiles in Black Memphis History. Memphis, Tennessee, while unknown to the average African American, is the capital of the Old South. Memphis was called King Cotton, and today, in 2019, Memphis is still the cotton capital of the world. In fact, it is in Memphis, Tennessee, where we find not only the greatest display of white supremacy in the 20th century, Memphis, Tennessee is the city of the Confederate South's greatest victories. Confederates gained 2 victories. Their most auspicious victory was the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, and their lasting and institutional victory is Graceland and Elvis Presley. It is Graceland in Memphis where we find the greatest display of white supremacy and victory of the South in the 20th century. Memphis is the city where the Confederate President Jefferson Davis and the racist Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest moved after the Civil War. The way that we black people in Memphis, Tennessee should celebrate our 200th anniversary is for blacks in Memphis and our nation and around the world to rise up and take on the racist, false narrative of Elvis and Graceland. White supremacists, white racists turned Elvis Presley and Graceland into the greatest display of white supremacy, segregation, racism, and victory for the South in the 20th century.
Elvis was a hero to most, but he never missed. To me, if he's straight out racist, the sucker was simple and plain. Motherfucking in John Wayne. Cause I'm black and I'm proud. I'm ready and hyped cause I'm amped.
It was 30 years ago that filmmaker Spike Lee challenged the powers to be in Memphis, Tennessee via using Public Enemy to bring attention to the false narrative of Elvis Presley, Graceland, and the white supremacist image of racism and segregation. White racists in Memphis created a false narrative of Elvis Presley, whereas they used Elvis Presley as America's greatest tool for segregation, racism, and white supremacy in modern American history. Elvis in Tupelo used to listen to Arthur Big Boy Kudik on the radio. Elvis, in his own words, said, "If I ever got to the place where I could feel like old Arthur felt, I'd be like a music man like nobody ever saw."
You ain't no friend of mine.
There is no room in this city for the vulgar performances of Elvis Presley.
It's shocking. I watched him gyrate his legs and swivel his hips. And our parent-teachers group feels he should not be on television.
We've set up a 20-man committee to do away with this vulgar, animalistic, nigger rock and roll bop. Our committee will check with the restaurant owners and the cafes to see what Presley records is on their machines and then ask them to do away with them.
You've learned anything from the criticism leveled at you?
No, I haven't.
You haven't, huh?
Because I don't feel that I'm doing anything wrong.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, the crying old time.
Rock and roll has got to go. And go it does at KWK. We're all through playing rock and roll records. This week is record-breaking week here at KWK. And after this week, no more rock and roll will be played on the air.
The obscenity and vulgarity of the rock and roll music is obviously a means by which the white man and his children can be driven to the level with a nigger. It is obviously nigger music.
The system of white supremacy and racism changed the narrative of Elvis Presley. Pundits note that it was Elvis' manager, Colonel Parker, that turned Elvis Presley into the greatest tool of segregation, racism, white supremacy, and victory for the Old South in the 20th century. The Colonel connected Elvis' image to the antebellum home of Graceland, the Old South. From 1958, Elvis practiced strict Southern protocol, whereas Elvis' image would be estranged from black people in the strictest sense of Southern protocol, whereas he was in the image of being only the king and supreme, and blacks were always associated in traditional Southern roles, like the maid.